This week's Grimm Fairy Tales, The 12 Brothers. There were once on a time a king and a queen who lived happily together and had 12 children, but they were all boys. Then said the king to his wife, "If the 13th child which thou art about to bring into the world is a girl, the 12 boys shall die, in order that her possessions may be great and that the kingdom may fall to her alone." He caused likewise 12 coffins to be made, which were already filled with shavings, and each lay the pillow for the dead. And he had them taken into a locked-up room, and then he gave the queen the key of it, and bade her not to speak of this to anyone. The mother, however, now sat and lamented all day long, until the youngest son, who was always with her, and whom she had named Benjamin from the Bible, said to her, "Dear Mom, why art thou so sad?" "Dearest child," she answered, "I may not tell thee." But he let her have no rest until she went and unlocked the room and showed him the 12 coffins ready filled with shavings. Then she said, "My dearest Benjamin, thy father has had these coffins made for thee, and for thy 11 brothers. For if I bring a little girl into the world, you are all to be killed and buried in them." And as she wept while she was saying this, the son comforted her and said, "Weep not, dear mother, we will save ourselves and go hence." But she said, "Go forth into the forest with thy 11 brothers, and let one sit constantly on the highest tree which can be found, and keep watch, looking towards the tower here in the castle. If I give birth to a little son, I will put up a white flag, and then you may venture to come back. But if I bear a daughter, I will hoist a red flag, and then fly hence as quickly as you are able. And may the good God protect you. And every night I will rise up and pray for you, in winter that you may be able to warm yourself at a fire, and in summer that you may not faint away in the heat." After she had blessed her sons, therefore, they went forth into the forest. They each kept watch in turn, and sat on the highest oak and looked towards the tower. When 11 days had passed, and the turn came to Benjamin, he saw that a flag was being raised. It was, however, not the white, but the blood-red flag which announced that they were all to die. When the brothers heard that, they were very angry and said, "Are we all to suffer death for the sake of a girl? We swear that we will avenge ourselves. Wheresoever we find a girl, her red blood shall flow." Thereupon they went deeper into the forest, and in the midst of it, where it was the darkest, they found a little bewitched hut, which was standing empty. Then said they, "Here we will dwell, and thou, Benjamin, who art the youngest and weakest, thou shalt stay at home and keep house. We others will go out and get food." Then they went into the forest and shot hares, wild deer, birds, and pigeons, and whatsoever there was to eat. This they took to Benjamin, who had to dress it for them in order that they might appease their hunger. They lived together 10 years in the little hut, and the time did not appear long to them. The little daughter which their mother, the queen, had given birth to was now grown up. She was good of heart and fair of face, and had a golden star on her forehead. Once, when it was the great washing, she saw 12 men's shirts among the things, and asked her mother, "To whom do these 12 shirts belong? For they are far too small for father." Then the queen answered with a heavy heart, "Dear child, these belong to thy 12 brothers." Said the maiden, "Where are my 12 brothers? I have never yet heard of them." She replied, "God knows where they are. They are wandering about the world." Then she took the maiden and opened the chamber for her, and showed her the 12 coffins with the shavings, and the pillows for the head. "These coffins," said she, "were destined for thy brothers, but they went away secretly before thou wert born." And she related to her how everything had happened. Then said the maiden, Dear mother, weep not. I will go and seek my brothers. So she took the 12 shirts and went forth, and straight into the great forest. She walked the whole day, and in the evening she came to the bewitched hut. Then she entered it and found a young boy who asked, From whence comest thou, and whither art thou bound? And was astonished that she was so beautiful and wore royal garments, and had a star on her forehead. And she answered, I am a king's daughter, and I am seeking my 12 brothers, and I will walk as far as the sky is blue until I find them. She likewise showed him the 12 shirts which belonged to them. Then Benjamin saw that she was his sister, and said, I am Benjamin, thy youngest brother. And she began to weep for joy, and Benjamin wept also. And they kissed and embraced each other with the greatest love. But after this he said, Dear sister, there is still one difficulty. We have agreed that every maiden whom we meet shall die, because we have been obliged to leave our kingdom on account of a girl. Then said she, I will willingly die if by so doing I can deliver my 12 brothers. No, answered he, thou shalt not die. Seat thyself beneath this tub until our 11 brothers come, and then I will soon come to an agreement with them. She did so, and when it was night the others came from hunting, and their dinner was ready. And as they were sitting at table and eating, they asked, What news is there? Said Benjamin, Don't you know anything? No, they answered. He continued, You have been in the forest, and I have stayed at home, and yet I know more than you do. Tell us then, they cried. He answered, But promise me that the first maiden who meets us shall not be killed. Yes, they all cried. She shall have mercy, only do tell us. Then said he, Our sister is here. And he lifted up the tub, and the king's daughter came forth in her royal garments with the golden star on her forehead. And she was beautiful, delicate, and fair. Then they were all rejoiced, and fell on her neck, and kissed and loved her with all their hearts. Now she stayed at home with Benjamin, and helped him with the work. The 11 went into the forest and caught game, and deer, and birds, and wood pigeons, that they might have food. And the little sister and Benjamin took care to make it ready for them. She sought for the wood for cooking, and herbs for vegetables, and put the pans on the fire, so that the dinner was always ready when the 11 came. She likewise kept order in the little house, and put beautifully white clean coverings on the little beds, and the brothers were always contented and lived in great harmony with her. Once on a time the 2 at home had prepared a beautiful entertainment, and when they were all together they sat down and ate and drank, and were full of gladness. There was, however, a little garden belonging to the bewitched house, wherein stood 12 lily flowers, which are likewise called students. She wished to give her brothers pleasure, and plucked the 12 flowers, and thought she would present each brother with one while at dinner. But at the selfsame moment that she plucked the flowers, the 12 brothers were changed into 12 ravens, and flew away over the forest, and the house and garden vanished likewise. And now the poor maiden was alone in the wild forest, and when she looked around, an old woman was standing near her, who said, My child, what hast thou done? Why didst thou not leave the 12 white flowers growing? They were thy brothers, who are now forevermore changed into ravens. The maiden said, weeping, Is there no way of delivering them? No, said the woman. There is but one in the whole world, and that is so hard that thou wilt not deliver them by it. For thou must be dumb for 7 years, and mayest not speak or laugh, and if thou speakest one single word, and only an hour of the 7 years is wanting, all is in vain, and thy brothers will be killed by the one word. Then said the maiden in her heart, I know with certainty that I shall set my brothers free, and went and sought a high tree, and seated herself in it, and span, and neither spoke nor laughed. Now, It so happened that a king was hunting in the forest, who had a great greyhound which ran to the tree on which the maiden was sitting, and sprang about it, whining and barking at her. Then the king came by and saw the beautiful king's daughter with the golden star on her brow, and was so charmed with her beauty that he called to ask her if she would be his wife. She made no answer, but nodded a little with her head. So he climbed up the tree himself, carried her down, placed her on his horse, and bore her home. Then the wedding was solemnized with great magnificence and rejoicing, but the bride neither spoke nor smiled. When they had lived happily together for a few years, the king's mother, who was a wicked woman, began to slander the young queen, and said to the king, "This is a common beggar girl whom thou hast brought back with thee. Who knows what impious tricks she practices secretly? Even if she be dumb and not able to speak, she still might laugh for once. But those who do not laugh have bad consciences." At first the king would not believe it, but the old woman urged this so long and accused her of so many evil things that at last the king let himself be persuaded and sentenced her to death. And now a great fire was lighted in the courtyard in which she was to be burnt, and the king stood above at the window and looked on with tearful eyes, because he still loved her so much. And when she was bound fast to the stake, and the fire was licking at her clothes with its red tongue, the last instant of the 7 years expired. Then a whirring sound was heard in the air, and 12 ravens came flying towards the place, and sank downwards, and when they touched the earth, they were her 12 brothers, whom she had delivered. They tore the fire asunder, extinguished the flames, set their dear sister free, and kissed and embraced her. And now, as she dared to open her mouth and speak, she told the king why she had been dumb, and had never laughed. The king rejoiced when he heard that she was innocent, and they all lived in great unity until their death. The wicked stepmother was taken before the judge, and put into a barrel filled with boiling oil and venomous snakes, and died an evil death. The king's son who feared nothing. There was once a king's son who was no longer content to stay at home in his father's house, and as he had no fear of anything, he thought, "I will go forth into the world. There the time will not seem long to me, and I shall see wonders enough." So he took leave of his parents and went forth, and on from morning till night, and whichever way his path led, it was the same to him. It came to pass that he got to the house of a giant, and as he was so tired, he sat down by the door and rested. And as he let his eyes roam here and there, he saw the giant's playthings lying in the yard. These were a couple of enormous balls, and 9 pins as tall as man. After a while, he had a fancy to set the 9 pins up, and then rolled the balls at them, and screamed and cried out when the 9 pins fell, and had a merry time of it. The giant heard the noise, stretched his head out the window, and saw a man, who was not taller than other men, and yet played with his 9 pins. "Little worm," cried he, "why art thou playing with my balls? Who gave thee strength to do it?" The king's son looked up, saw the giant, and said, "Oh, thou blockhead, thou thinkest indeed that thou only hast strong arms. I can do everything I want to do." The giant came down and watched the bowling with great admiration, and said, "Child of man, if thou art one of that kind, go and bring me an apple of the tree of life." "What dost thou want with it?" said the king's son. "I do not want the apple for myself," answered the giant, "but I have a betrothed bride who wishes for it. I have traveled far about the world and cannot find the tree." "I will soon find it," said the king's son, "and I do not know what it is to prevent me from getting the apple down." The giant said, "Thou really believes it to be so easy? The garden in which the tree stands is surrounded by an iron railing, and in front of the railing lie wild beasts, each close to the other, and they keep watch and let no man go in." "They will be sure to let me in," said the king's son. "Yes, but even if thou dost get into the garden, and seest the apple hanging to the tree, it is still not thine. A ring hangs in front of it, through which any one who wants to reach the apple and break it off must put his hand, and no one has yet had the luck to do it." "That luck will be mine," said the king's son. Then he took leave of the giant and went forth over the mountain and valley, and through plains and forest, until at length he came to the wondrous garden. The beasts lay round about it, but they had put their heads down and were asleep. Moreover, they did not awake when he went up to them. So he stepped over them, climbed the fence, and got safely into the garden. There in the very middle of it stood the tree of life, and the red apples were shining upon the branches. He climbed up the trunk to the top, and as he was about to reach out for an apple, he saw a ring hanging before it. But he thrust his hand through that without any difficulty, and gathered the apple. The ring closed tightly on his arm, and all at once he felt a prodigious strength flowing through his veins. When he had come down again from the tree with the apple, he would not climb over the fence, but grasped the great gate, and had no need to shake it more than once before it sprang open with a loud crash. Then he went out, and the lion which had been lying down before was awake and sprang after him, not in rage and fierceness, but following him humbly as its master. The king's son took the giant the apple he had promised him, and said, "Seest thou, I have brought it without difficulty." The giant was glad that his desire had been soon satisfied, hastened to his bride and gave it to her, the apple for which she had wished. She was a beautiful and wise maiden, and as she did not see the ring on his arm, she said, "I shall never believe that thou hast brought the apple until I see the ring on thine arm." The giant said, "I have nothing to do but go home and fetch it," and thought it would be easy to take away by force from the weak man what he would not give of his own free will. He therefore demanded the ring from him, but the king's son refused it. "Where the apple is, the ring must be also," said the giant. "If thou wilt not give it of thine own accord, thou must fight with me for it." They wrestled with each other for a long time, but the giant could not get the better of the king's son, who was strengthened by the magical power of the ring. Then the giant thought of a stratagem, and said, "I have got warm with fighting, and so hast thou. We will bathe in the river and cool ourselves before we begin again." The king's son, who knew nothing of falsehood, went with him to the water, and pulled off his clothes, the ring also from his arm, and sprang into the river. The giant instantly snatched the ring and ran away with it. But the lion which had observed the theft pursued the giant, tore the ring out of his hand, and brought it back to its master. Then the giant placed himself behind an oak tree, and while the king's son was busy putting on his clothes again, surprised him and put both his eyes out. And now the unhappy king's son stood there, and was blind and knew not how to help himself. Then the giant came back to him, took him by the hand as if he were someone who wanted to guide him, and led him to the top of a high rock. There he left him standing and thought, "Just 2 more steps, and he will fall down and kill himself, and I can take the ring from him." But the faithful lion had not deserted its master. It held him fast by the clothes and drew him gradually back again. When the giant came and wanted to rob the dead man, he saw that his cunning had been in vain. "Is there no way then of destroying a weak child of man like that?" said he angrily to himself, and seized the king's son and led him back again to the precipice by another way. But the lion, which saw his evil design, helped its master out of danger here also. When they had got close to the edge, the giant let the blind man's hand drop, and was going to leave him behind alone. But the lion pushed the giant so that he was thrown down and fell, dashed to pieces, on the ground. The faithful animal again drew its master back from the precipice, and guided him to a tree by which flowed a clear brook. The king's son sat down there, but the lion lay down and sprinkled the water in his face with its paws. Scarcely had a couple of drops wetted the sockets of his eyes, then he was once more able to see something, and remarked a little bird flying quite close by, which wounded itself against the trunk of a tree. On this it went down to the water and bathed itself therein, and then it soared upwards and swept between the trees without touching them, as if it had recovered its sight again. Then the king's son recognized a sign from God, and stooped down to the water, and washed and bathed his face in it. And when he arose, he had his eyes once more, brighter and clearer than they had ever been. The king's son thanked God for his great mercy, and traveled with his lion onwards through the world. And it came to pass that he arrived before a castle which was enchanted. In the gateway stood a maiden of beautiful form and fine face, but she was quite black. She spoke to him and said, "Ah, if thou couldst but deliver me from the evil spell which is thrown over me." "What shall I do?" said the king's son. The maiden answered, "Thou must pass 3 nights in the great hall of this enchanted castle, but thou must let no fear enter thy heart, when they are doing their worst to torment thee. If thou bearest it without letting a sound escape thee, I shall be free. Thy life they dare not take." Then said the king's son, "I have no fear. With God's help I will try it." So he went gaily into the castle, and when it grew dark he seated himself in the large hall and waited. Everything was quiet, however, till midnight, when all at once a great tumult began, and out of every hole and corner came little devils. They behaved as if they did not see him, seated themselves in the middle of the room, lighted a fire and began to gamble. When one of them lost, he said, "It is not right. Someone is here who does not belong to us. It is his fault that I am losing." "Wait, you fellow behind the stove, I am coming," said another. The screaming became still louder, so that no one could have heard it without terror. The king's son stayed sitting quite quietly, and was not afraid, but at last the devils jumped up from the ground and fell on him, and there were so many of them that he could not defend himself from them. They dragged him about on the floor, pinched him, pricked him, beat him, and tormented him, but no sound escaped from him. Towards morning they disappeared, and he was so exhausted that he could scarcely move his limbs. But when day dawned, the black maiden came to him. She bore in her hand a little bottle wherein was the water of life, wherewith she washed him. And he at once felt all pain depart, and new strength flow through his veins. She said, "Thou hast held out successfully for 1 night, but 2 more lie before thee." Then she went away again, and as she was going, he observed that her feet had become white. The next night the devils came and began their gambols anew. They fell on the king's son and beat him much more severely than the night before, until his body was covered with wounds. But as he bore all quietly, they were forced to leave him, and when dawn appeared, the maiden came and healed him with the water of life. And then she went away. He saw with joy that she had already become white to the tips of her fingers, and now he had only 1 night more to go through. But it was the worst. The hobgoblins came again. "Art thou there still?" cried they. "Thou shalt be tormented till thy breath stops." They pricked him and beat him and threw him here and there, and pulled him by the arms and legs as if they wanted to tear him to pieces. But he bore everything and never uttered a cry. At last the devils vanished, but he lay fainting there and did not stir, nor could he raise his eyes to look at the maiden who came in and sprinkled and bathed him with the water of life. But suddenly he was freed from all pain, and felt fresh and healthy as if he had awakened from sleep. And when he opened his eyes, he saw the maiden standing by him, snow white and fair as day. "Rise," said she, "and swing thy sword 3 times over the stairs, and then all will be delivered." And when he had done that, the whole castle was released from enchantment, and the maiden was a rich king's daughter. The servants came and said that the table was already set in the great hall, and dinner served up. Then they sat down and ate and drank together, and in the evening the wedding was solemnized with great rejoicings. The Drummer. A young drummer went out quite alone one evening into the country, and came to a lake on the shore of which he perceived 3 pieces of white linen lying. "What fine linen," said he, and put 1 piece in his pocket. He returned home, thought no more of what he had found, and went to bed. Just as he was going to sleep, it seemed to him as if someone was saying his name. He listened and was aware of a soft voice which cried to him, "Drummer, drummer, wake up." As it was a dark night, he could see no one, but it appeared to him that a figure was hovering about his bed. "What do you want?" he asked. "Give me back my dress," answered the voice, "that you took away from me last evening by the lake." "You shall have it back again," said the drummer, "if you will tell me who you are." "Ah," replied the voice, "I am the daughter of a mighty king, but I have fallen into the power of a witch, and am shut up on the glass mountain. I have to bathe in the lake every day with my 2 sisters, but I cannot fly back without my dress. My sisters have gone away, but I have been forced to stay behind. I entreat you to give me my dress back." "Be easy, poor child," said the drummer. "I will willingly give it back to you." He took it out of his pocket and reached it to her in the dark. She snatched it in haste and wanted to go away with it. "Stop a moment. Perhaps I could help you." "You can only help me by ascending the glass mountain and freeing me from the power of the witch. But you cannot come to the glass mountain, and indeed if you were quite close to it, you could not ascend to it." "When I want to do a thing, I always can do it," said the drummer. "I am sorry for you, and have no fear of anything, but I do not know the way which leads to the glass mountain." "The road goes through the great forest in which the man-eaters live," she answered, "and more than that, I dare not tell you." And then he heard her wings quiver as she flew away. By daybreak the drummer arose, buckled on his drum, and went without fear straight into the forest. After he had walked for a while without seeing any giants, he thought to himself, "I must waken up the sluggards." And he hung his drum before him, and beat such a reveille that the birds flew out of the trees with loud cries. It was not long before a giant who had been lying sleeping among the grass rose up and was as tall as a fir tree. "Wretch," cried he, "what art thou drumming here for, and waking me out of my best sleep?" "I am drumming," he replied, "because I want to show the way to many thousands who are following me." "What do they want in my forest?" demanded the giant. "They want to put an end to thee, and cleanse the forest of such a monster as thou art." "Ho, ho," said the giant, "I will trample you all to death like so many ants." "Dost thou think thou canst do anything against us?" said the drummer. "If thou stoopest to take hold of one, he will jump away and hide himself, But when thou art lying down and sleeping, they will come forth from every thicket and creep up to thee. Every one of them has a hammer of steel in his belt, and with that they will beat in thy skull." The giant grew angry and thought, "If I meddle with the crafty folk, it might turn out badly for me. I can strangle wolves and bears, but I cannot protect thyself from these earthworms. Listen, little fella," said he, "go back again, and I will promise you that for the future I will leave you and your comrades in peace. And if there is anything else you wish for, tell me, for I am quite willing to do something to please you." "Thou hast long legs," said the drummer, "and canst run quicker than I. Carry me to the glass mountain, and I will give my followers a signal to go back, and they shall leave thee in peace this time." "Come here, worm," said the giant. "Seat thyself on my shoulder. I will carry thee where thou wishest to be." The giant lifted him up, and the drummer began to beat his drum up aloft to his heart's delight. The giant thought, "That is the signal for the other people to turn back." After a while, a second giant was standing in the road, who took the drummer from the first and stuck him in his buttonhole. The drummer laid hold of the button, which was as large as a dish, held on by it, and looked merrily around. Then they came to a third giant, who took him out of the buttonhole and set him on the rim of his hat. Then the drummer walked backwards and forwards up above, and looked over the trees, and when he perceived a mountain in the blue distance, he thought, "That must be the glass mountain." And so it was. The giant only made 2 steps more, and they reached the foot of the mountain, where the giant put him down. The drummer demanded to be put on the summit of the glass mountain, but the giant shook his head, growled something in his beard, and went back into the forest. And now the poor drummer was standing before the mountain, which was as high as if 3 mountains were piled on each other, and at the same time as smooth as a looking-glass, and did not know how to get up it. He began to climb, but that was useless, for he always slipped back again. "If one was a bird now," thought he, but what was the good of wishing? No wings grew on him. Whilst he was standing thus, not knowing what to do, he saw not far from him 2 men who were struggling fiercely together. He went up to them and saw that they were disputing about a saddle which was lying on the ground before them, and which both of them wanted to have. "What fools you are," said he, "to quarrel about a saddle, when you have not a horse for it." "The saddle is worth fighting about," answered one of the men. "Whosoever sits on it and wishes himself in any place, even if it should be the very end of the earth, gets there the instant he has uttered the wish. The saddle belonged to us in common. It is my turn to ride on it, but that other man will not let me do it." "I will soon decide the quarrel," said the drummer, and he went to a short distance and stuck a white rod in the ground. Then he came back and said, "Now run to the goal, and whosoever gets there first shall ride first." Both put themselves into a trot, but hardly had they gone a couple of steps before the drummer swung himself on the saddle, wished himself on the glass mountain, and before anyone could turn round, he was there. On the top of the mountain was a plain. There stood an old stone house, and in front of the house lay a great fish pond, but behind it was a dark forest. He saw neither men nor animals. Everything was quiet. Only the wind rustled among the trees, and the clouds moved by, quite close above his head. He went to the door and knocked. When he had knocked for the 3rd time, an old woman with a brown face and red eyes opened the door. She had spectacles on her long nose and looked sharply at him. Then she asked what he wanted. "Entrance, food, and a bed for the night," replied the drummer. "That thou shalt have," said the old woman, "if thou wilt perform 3 services in return." "Why not?" he answered. "I am not afraid of any kind of work, however hard it may be." The old woman let him go in and gave him some food and a good bed at night. The next morning, when he had his sleep out, she took a thimble from her wrinkled finger, reached it to the drummer, and said, "Go to work now, and empty out the pond with this thimble, but thou must have it done before night, and must have sought out all the fishes which are in the water, and laid them side by side, according to their kind and size." "That is strange work," said the drummer, but he went to the pond and began to empty it. He bailed the whole morning, but what can anyone do to a great lake with a thimble, even if he were to bail for 1,000 years? When it was noon, he thought, "It's all useless, and whether I work or not, it will come to the same thing." So he gave it up and sat down. Then came a maiden out of the house, who set a little basket with food before him, and said, "What ails thee, that thou sittest so sadly here?" He looked at her and saw that she was wondrously beautiful. "Ah," said he, "I cannot finish the first piece of work. How will it be with the others? I came forth to seek a king's daughter who is said to dwell here, but I have not found her, and I will go farther." "Stay here," said the maiden. "I will help thee out of thy difficulty. Thou art tired. Lay thy head in my lap and sleep. When thou wakest again, thy work will be done." The drummer did not need to be told that twice. As soon as his eyes were shut, she turned a wishing ring and said, "Rise, water, fishes come out." Instantly, the water rose on high like a white mist and moved away with the other clouds, and the fishes sprang on the shore and laid themselves side by side, each according to his size and kind. When the drummer awoke, he saw with amazement that all was done. But the maiden said, "One of the fish is not lying with those of its own kind, but quite alone. When the old woman comes tonight and sees that all she demanded has been done, she will ask thee, 'What is this fish lying alone for?' Then throw the fish in her face and say, 'This one shall be for thee, old witch.'" In the evening, the witch came, and when she had put this question, he threw the fish in her face. She behaved as if she did not remark it, and said nothing, but looked at him with malicious eyes. Next morning she said, "Yesterday it was too easy for thee. I must give thee harder work. Today thou must hew down the whole of the forest, split the wood into logs and pile them up, and everything must be finished by the evening." She gave him an axe, a mallet, and 2 wedges, but the axe was made of lead, and the mallet and wedges were of tin. When he began to cut, the edge of the axe turned back, and the mallet and wedges were beaten out of shape. He did not know how to manage, but at midday the maiden came once more with his dinner and comforted him. "Lay thy head on my lap," said she, "and sleep. When thou awakest, thy work will be done." She turned her wishing ring, and in an instant the whole forest fell down with a crash. The wood split and arranged itself in heaps, and it seemed just as if unseen giants were finishing the work. When he awoke, the maiden said, "Dost thou see that the wood is piled up and arranged? One bow alone remains. But when the old woman comes this evening and asks thee about the bow, give her a blow with it and say, 'That is for thee, thou witch.'" The old woman came. "There thou seest how easy the work was," said she. "But for whom hast thou left that bow which is lying there still?" "For thee, thou witch," he replied, and gave her a blow with it. But she pretended not to feel it, laughed scornfully, and said, "Early tomorrow morning thou shalt arrange all the wood in one heap, set fire to it, and burn it." He rose at break of day and began to pick up the wood. But how can a single man get a whole forest together? The work made no progress. The maiden, however, did not desert him in his need. She brought him his food at noon, and when he had eaten, he laid his head on her lap and went to sleep. When he awoke, the entire pile of wood was burning in one enormous flame, which stretched its tongue out into the sky. "Listen to me," said the maiden. "When the witch comes, she will give thee all kinds of orders. Do whatever she asks thee without fear, and then she will not be able to get the better of thee. But if thou art afraid, the fire will lay hold of thee and consume thee. At last, when thou hast done everything, seize her with both thy hands and throw her into the midst of the fire." The maiden departed, and the old woman came sneaking up to him. "Oh, I am cold," said she, "but that is a fire that burns. It warms my old bones for me, and does me good. But there is a log lying there which won't burn. Bring it out for me. When thou hast done that, thou art free, and mayest go where thou likest. Come, go in with a good will." The drummer did not reflect long. He sprang into the midst of the flames, but they did not hurt him, and could not even singe a hair of his head. He carried the log out and laid it down. Hardly, however, had the wood touched the earth than it was transformed, and the beautiful maiden who had helped him in his need stood before him. And by the silken and shining golden garments which she wore, he knew right well that she was the king's daughter. But the old woman laughed venomously and said, "Thou thinkest thou hast her safe, but thou hast not got her yet." Just as she was about to fall on the maiden and take her away, the youth seized the old woman with both his hands, raised her up on high, and threw her into the jaws of the fire, which closed over her as if it were delighted that an old witch was to be burnt. Then the king's daughter looked at the drummer, and when she saw that he was a handsome youth and remembered how he had risked his life to deliver her, she gave him her hand and said, "Thou hast ventured everything for my sake, but I will also do everything for thine. Promise to be true to me, and thou shalt be my husband. We shall not want for riches. We shall have enough with what the witch has gathered together here." She led him into the house, where there were chests and coffers crammed with the old woman's treasures. The maiden left the gold and silver where it was, and took only the precious stones. She would not stay any longer on the glass mountain, so the drummer said to her, "Seat thyself by me on my saddle, and then we will fly down like birds." "I do not like the old saddle," said she. "I need only turn my wishing ring, and we shall be at home." "Very well, then," answered the drummer. "Then wish us in front of the town gate." In the twinkling of an eye they were there, but the drummer said, "I will just go to my parents and tell them the news. Wait for me outside here. I shall be back soon." "Ah," said the king's daughter, "I beg thee to be careful. On thy arrival do not kiss thy parents on thy right cheek, or else thou wilt forget everything, and I shall stay behind here outside alone and deserted." "How can I forget thee?" said he, and promised to her to come back very soon, and gave his hand upon it. When he went into his father's house, he had changed so much that no one knew who he was. For the 3 days which he had passed on the glass mountain had been 3 years. Then he made himself known, and his parents fell on his neck with joy, and his heart was so moved that he forgot what the maiden had said, and kissed them on both cheeks. But when he had given them the kiss on the right cheek, every thought of the king's daughter vanished from him. He emptied out his pockets and laid handfuls of the largest jewels on the table. The parents had not the least idea what to do with the riches. Then the father built a magnificent castle all surrounded by gardens, woods, and meadows, as if a prince were going to live in it. And when it was ready, the mother said, "I have found a maiden for thee, and the wedding shall be in 3 days." The son was content to do as his parents desired. The poor king's daughter had stood for a long time without the town, waiting for the return of the young woman. When evening came, she said, He must certainly have kissed his parents on the right cheek, and has forgotten me." Her heart was full of sorrow. She wished herself into a solitary little hut in a forest, and would not return to her father's court. Every evening she went into the town and passed the young man's house. He often saw her, but he no longer knew her. At length she heard the people saying, "The wedding will take place tomorrow." Then she said, "I will try if I can to win his heart back." On the first day of the wedding ceremonies, she turned her wishing ring and said, "A dress as bright as the sun." Instantly, the dress lay before her, and it was as bright as if it had been woven of real sunbeams. When all the guests were assembled, she entered the hall. Everyone was amazed at the beautiful dress, and the bride most of all. And as pretty dresses were the things she had most delight in, she went to the stranger and asked if she would sell it to her. "Not for money," she answered, "but if I may pass the first night outside the door of the room where your betrothed sleep, I will give it to you." The bride could not overcome her desire and consented, but she mixed a sleeping draught with the wine her betrothed took at night, which made him fall into a deep sleep. And when all had become quiet, the king's daughter crouched down by the door of the bedroom, opened it just a little, and cried, "Drummer, drummer, I pray thee hear. Hast thou forgotten thou heldest me dear? That on the glass mountain we sat hour by hour, that I rescued thy life from the witch's power. Didst thou not plight thy troth to me? Drummer, drummer, hearken to me." But it was all in vain. The drummer did not awake, and when morning dawned, the king's daughter was forced to go back again as she came. On the second evening, she turned her wishing ring and said, "A dress as silvery as the moon." When she appeared at the feast in the dress, which was as soft as moonbeams, it again excited the desire of the bride, and the king's daughter gave it to her for permission to pass the second night also, outside the door of the bedroom. Then in the stillness of the night she cried, "Drummer, drummer, I pray thee hear. Hast thou forgotten thou heldest me dear? That on the glass mountain we sat hour by hour, that I rescued thy life from the witch's power. Didst thou not plight thy troth to me? Drummer, drummer, hearken to me." But the drummer, who was stupefied with the sleeping draught, could not be aroused. Sadly, next morning she went back to her hut in the forest, but the people in the house had heard the lamentations of the strange maiden, and told the bridegroom about it. They told him also that it was impossible that he could hear anything of it, because the maiden he was going to marry had poured a sleeping draught into his wine. On the third evening, the king's daughter turned her wishing ring and said, "A dress glittering like the stars." When she showed herself therein at the feast, the bride was quite beside herself with the splendor of the dress, which far surpassed the others, and she said, "I must and will have it." The maiden gave it as she had given the others for permission to spend the night outside the bridegroom's door. The bridegroom, however, did not drink the wine which was handed to him before he went to bed, but poured it behind the bed, and when everything was quiet, he heard a sweet voice which called to him, "Drummer, drummer, I pray thee hear. Hast thou forgotten thou heldest me dear? That on the glass mountain we sat hour by hour, that I rescued thy life from the witch's power. Didst thou not plight thy troth to me? Drummer, drummer, hearken to me." Suddenly his memory returned to him. "Ah," cried he, "how can I have acted so unfaithfully? But the kiss which in the joy of my heart I gave my parents on the right cheek, that is to blame for it all. That is what stupefied me." He sprang up, took the king's daughter by the hand, and led her to his parents' bed. "This is my true bride," said he. "If I marry the other, I shall do a great wrong." The parents, when they heard how everything had happened, gave their consent. Then the lights in the hall were lighted again. Drums and trumpets were brought. Friends and relations were invited to come, and the real wedding was solemnized with great rejoicing. The first bride received the beautiful dresses as a compensation, and declared herself satisfied.